right, guys, we have got our predictions here for the season win total of the Atlanta Falcons. We're also going to take a look at the roster and some other things related to their season before we make a pick. So let's jump right on into it. The over-under here for the Atlanta Falcons, 8.5, -115 to the over, -105 to the under. Arthur Smith, still head coach, someone I think is pretty underrated, puts together a good game plan most of the time, calls the plays, on offense, and he may not throw it a ton, and he may not throw it in obvious throwdowns and things like that, but he's not he's not useless like some people tend to view him, which is weird to me, but that is what it is. Defensive coordinator we'll get into. They got a new one over from New Orleans. But let's just run through the offense quickly. Offensive line, best run blocking offensive line in the league last year, comfortably. They're hoping to upgrade at left guard with Bergeron in the second round of the draft. If he can step in and play well immediately, there should be no hiccups here in the run game. And just excellent play all around. Center could play a little bit better, but the rest of the piece is really, really good. And the running back room behind it is obviously incredibly good. They got Algier, Cordell Patterson, Bijan just drafted. So very, very thick running back room. Bijan should jump in and be a really good back right from the get-go. Algier's a really nice piece. He ran for, I forgot how much last year, well over 1,000. And Cordell Patterson is someone you can move around a lot now. You can run 2 running back sets, things like that. There's a lot of things you can do with these weapons in a run-heavy scheme, and we'll see how that works as the year goes on. Passing-wise, they had a couple receivers, Scotty Miller, Matt Collins. They're nice-ish additions. Drake London will hope to take another step. He had a good year last year, and he's a really good possession receiver. I like him, and he should be a nice blanket there for Desmond Ridder. Tight end, Kyle Pitts and others. Kyle Pitts will continue to be an enigma, I guess, until they, force him into the offense more, or he just gets a little bit more in tune with the NFL. It takes a while for this position, or it takes a while for young players to grasp this position. It normally takes 3 to 4 years for tight ends to come out of college and really get going in the NFL. So we'll see if he can take another step or two this year. And then the big piece, Desmond Ridder will be at quarterback here. And I think he's got some stuff to work with. I'm not down on him. I think he could be a top 20-ish kind of guy here in this system. Last year, we'll just look at last year. PFF isn't great, but just bear with me here. 12th in big throw percentage is really nice. 7th in turnover-worthy plays is also really nice. If you're going to be in a run-heavy system, game managing, those are things you want, okay? You don't want to be throwing too many turnover-worthy throws. You don't want to be turning the ball over. Games are going to be shorter. They're going to be less possessions when you're running the ball a ton. Big throw percentage is obviously great. He's got a really nice deep ball, and they may have added a player or two to kind of help stretch the field a little bit here. So I'm not overly down on Ridder. I don't see him as just some pumpkin that's nothing really. I think he can be useful here, and this is the perfect spot for someone like Ridder to go ahead and game manage in a system where that's what you're here for. Don't turn the ball over. Make some throws here and there. I think Ridder can definitely do it, and kind of sneaky athletic. So this is an offense I think can tick. It's an offense I think has upside despite everything, because I think the passing game gets overlooked, and I think Ridder is useful in that position. As for the defense, new defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen comes from New Orleans, the defensive line coach there. So we'll see how that goes. It sounds like the players like him, so we'll see. But last year the defense was not great. The defensive line didn't get any pressure whatsoever, really, all year long. They've bought a couple pieces in. Onyemata's a really good piece in the middle, good pass rusher. He'll hope to kind of bring his run defending back up a little bit. He had a bad year with that last year. And then they bought in some older guys. Calais Campbell is okay. Bud Dupree he just hasn't been good. He's not good, hasn't been good for a while. So we'll see there. Onyemata's a nice piece, but they'll want some more pressure, whether they get it or not with this group. I'm not too sure. Maybe a little bit better, but not great. Caden Ellis comes in. It's a nice piece at linebacker. But the secondary is where a lot of the upgrades have been made, if you want to call them that. Jesse Bates comes in. Ton of money from Cincinnati. A really good safety. Mike Hughes comes in. A really good slot corner. I like Hughes. Jeff Okudah is probably the big one here, mainly because he needs to continue to take steps. He took a couple steps last year. And, if he's going to be your number 2, it's going to be difficult if he's kind of reverts back to what he's been the first year or two. So they want him to take another step. They're hoping he can continue to take steps, and he'll need to take steps in this secondary. AJ Terrell is obviously excellent. Richie Grant is a nice piece as well. So if Okudah has a really good year or a good year at that second corner spot, this can be a really good secondary. Problem is the defense will need to go ahead or the defensive line will need to go ahead and get more pressure. I'm not so sure they can go ahead and counter up a bunch of it. But the secondary should hold its own a little bit longer than most places. But the D-line will need to get pressure here for this defense to be successful. And then we can take a look at the schedule. I guess their toughest stretch is right at the beginning. This is one of the easier schedules in the NFL for me. Carolina, Green Bay, and then at Detroit, at Jacksonville is their first 4. That's probably their toughest stretch. They have a tough stretch at the end of the year. At Carolina, Indy, at Chicago, at New Orleans. 3 games on the road when you're trying to push playoffs, division. If they're in that scenario, 2 division on the road, 3 on the road of the last 4. It's not ideal. But as for the schedule, they've got 3 games, I guess, on the road. The Lions, Jags, and Jets, where they're going to be dogs of 4 or more. Other than that, they're going to be dogs of less than 3 or favorites the rest of the year. There are a lot of games in between the 3s here. So a lot of coin flippy type games. 8.5 is where they have to get to. Do we think we can get there? Yes. If they start Carolina, Green Bay, at Detroit, at Jacksonville, if you go 2-2, you're in a really good spot. You got Houston and Washington, at Tampa, the next 3, at Tennessee, home to Minnesota, at Arizona, New Orleans, at the Jets, and then it kind of back into it, Tampa, and then the end here. So it's not a crazy difficult schedule, as we said. There are a lot of winnable games here, but it's also kind of on edge. I don't see this Falcons team as like a incredible team. Less possessions the way they run the football. So it could be, a lot of weird things can happen and you could lose games. A lot of weird things could happen and you could win games. But, I think the schedule is pretty favorable. I don't think there are a ton of offenses on here that are gonna dominate through the air. Minnesota, Jacksonville, maybe. Detroit is the one I'm worried about, really. Detroit has a great O-line. You're not going to get pressure from this D-line here, and there's some good weapons all over the place. It's inside. So games like that are going to be really difficult for Atlanta, but you're also going to play games like at Arizona where they're not going to be able to stop you running the football. Tampa Bay, where the offensive line isn't good. If you can dominate there on the offensive line, or if you can dominate other offensive lines with this secondary, you're going to be in a really good spot. But we're going to go over 8.5 at -115 here. Schedule lines up nice for them. I like the additions in the secondary. And I think this offense has a higher ceiling than it looks necessarily on paper, than what people think when you just look at Desmond Ridder in general. So we're going over 8.5 at -115, and that will be our play. We were going to get all the other teams rolling. We've done Arizona already. And tomorrow we'll add another.